All right, let's just dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to decode exactly how today's most critical current affairs map directly to your UPSC syllabus. Today's digest isn't just a random list of news items. It's a blueprint of the structural shifts happening right now in our economy and society. We have a lot of ground to cover and absolutely zero time to waste.
We're skipping the pleasantries today because your time is precious, or jumping straight into the hard data, the static connections, and those definitive frameworks you need to shape your mains answers across GS Papers 1, 2, and 3. Let's get right into the economy.
2.43 lakh crore rupees. Just wrap your head around that number for a second. That is the record-breaking April 2026 GST collection. It's literally the highest collection since the very rollout of the GST. Breaking this record right now is massive, because it happens precisely when post-pandemic recovery is supposed to be plateauing, yet collections are rising. It's the absolute perfect hook for our GS Paper 3 government budgeting analysis. But, as you know, numbers alone don't clear the exam. Connections do.
So how exactly does this headline map to your exam? Well, it connects straight back to the static constitutional bedrock. The news is this record collection, right? But your foundation, that's the 101st Constitutional Amendment Act and Article 246A. Remember, Article 246A fundamentally changed our fiscal structure by giving concurrent power to both Parliament and state legislators to tax goods and services. You put the news and this bedrock together and boom, it slots perfectly into your GS Paper 3 prep.
But, there's actually a hidden story beneath that massive headline number. While the top-line collection looks phenomenal, a deeper dive reveals a pretty glaring structural weakness. Domestic sales growth was actually really sluggish at just 4.3%, while import-led collections surged by a whopping 26%. Think about what that means. When import collections surge that dramatically while domestic sales basically stagnate, it's a huge red flag that domestic consumption might be masking a much deeper structural fatigue. This is exactly the kind of nuance the examiner is hunting for.
Because of that specific nuance, imagine this exact question popping up in GS Paper 3. Critically analyze the structural strengths and weaknesses of India's GST regime with reference to the April 2026 collections data. You can't just go in there and praise the high collections. Your framework needs to be perfectly balanced, which we're going to break down right now. Your definitive answer structure really requires a careful balancing act here. You'd introduce the rollout and that 2.43 lakh crore record. For your strengths, you've absolutely got to highlight the unified market and digital compliance through the GSTIN network. But crucially, under weaknesses, you must address that import-led growth vulnerability we just talked about, the compliance burdens on MSMEs, and evasion through fake input tax credit claims. That major loophole where entities set up shell companies just to claim tax credits without any actual movement of goods? Yeah, definitely mention that.
Just like we're seeing these structural growing pains in our tax systems, we're seeing them in our labor markets too. So moving on to GS Paper 2, let's map out the flow of India's evolving gig economy regulations. We're going from the national level, the Code on Social Security 2020, all the way down to the very first state-level operationalization, which is the Karnataka Platform-Based Gig Workers Act. This falls squarely under social justice and governance.
Now here is a massive gray area where examiners just love to set traps in prelims. Gig workers are notoriously tough to classify. They aren't your traditional employees, but they aren't exactly fully independent self-employed contractors either. And while you might intuitively think the Central Code protects them fully, well, there's a major catch.
This is the crucial prelims distinction you absolutely cannot afford to mix up. The Code on Social Security 2020 only defines and recognizes gig workers. But, as we know, mere recognition falls way short on the ground. Think about it. If a delivery rider gets into an accident, a legal definition doesn't pay their hospital bills, right? The Karnataka law, on the other hand, is the very first fully operationalized grievance mechanism. It has an actual portal and a funding model. Recognition versus operationalized redressal. Do not conflate those two.
Which naturally leads us to a highly probable mains question. Discuss the regulatory frameworks needed to protect gig workers without stifling innovation. This right here is a classic GS2 balancing act. How do you protect a highly vulnerable worker without completely destroying the flexibility and low barrier entry that actually created their job in the first place?
So your answer needs to move logically across this framework. You want to start with the inherent challenges, things like no employment contract, zero provident fund, and algorithmic management, where a worker's boss is essentially just a black box app that penalizes them for taking too long. Then present the Karnataka model as your case study. Specifically mention the IPGRS, the the Integrated Public Grievance Redressal System, and the Mandatory Independent Dispute Resolution Committee. Finally, wrap it up with the national balance required. We definitely need national portability of benefits, but we absolutely must avoid the kind of overregulation that just kills platform innovation.
All right, let's cross borders now and shift gears to international relations and energy security. On April 28th, the UAE made a massive, highly strategic decision to exit OPEC, and that becomes effective May 1st, 2026. Now, OPEC relies heavily on coordinating supply to manipulate and stabilize global prices. So leaving means the UAE can just pump oil freely without any quotas holding them back. They're actually the 5th country to leave since 2016, but they are by far the biggest producer to do so. This move is freeing up a staggering 1.5 million barrels per day of unutilized production capacity.
And here is exactly why this matters so much for India. We are the world's 3rd largest crude importer, and the UAE is our 4th largest supplier. More oil flooding the global market potentially means lower global oil prices, which directly and positively impacts our import bill. But crucially, a surplus market gives us serious leverage. It allows us to negotiate much better rates to top up our strategic petroleum reserves, which, remember, are located in Visakhapatnam, Mangaluru, and Padur at a massive discount.
Now, watch out for this prelims trap regarding energy memberships. Remember that OPEC is headquartered in Vienna, and Saudi Arabia is considered the swing producer, basically the dominant player that can adjust its massive output to manipulate global prices. But where does India sit in all this? Well, India is an association member of the IEA, the International Energy Agency, which was actually formed in response to the 1973 OPEC embargo. But listen closely, India is not a member of OPEC. Keep that straight.
From securing our energy to understanding our own demographics, let's move over to GS Paper 1, Society. Let's quickly flowchart the upcoming Census 2027 structure. It's split into 2 distinct and, honestly, highly sensitive phases. Phase 1 is the digital self-enumeration, which is running right now. Phase 2, scheduled for a bit later, is the highly debated caste enumeration.
Now, given the intense political and social climate surrounding Phase 2, you've got to be prepared to write objectively about this dual-edged sword. UPSC is going to test your ability to maintain absolute neutrality here. You need to balance the genuine, objective necessity of empirical data for policymaking against the immense, practical, logistical realities of actually collecting it.
Your arguments here must be structurally impartial. On one hand, yes, the data is highly significant for targeted welfare delivery, parliamentary delimitation, and providing an actual evidence base for reservation policies. But on the other hand, you have to demonstrate to the examiner that you understand the massive implementation challenges. For example, just the sheer logistical nightmare of standardizing thousands of overlapping and synonymous caste and subcaste names across distinct linguistic lines in different states. It's a colossal task.
Okay, take a breath, because we are entering our rapid-fire sweep to make sure absolutely 0 news items are missed from today's sources. First up, internal security. The NCB seized 349 kilograms of cocaine worth over 1,700 crores in Mumbai under Operation White Strike. Over in global conflicts, for IR, Ukraine struck the Tuapse oil terminal, while Russia hit Chernobyl with drones. Meanwhile, US-EU trade tensions are really spiking. Trump raised EU auto tariffs to 25%, breaking the Turnberry Agreement ceiling. That essentially means abandoning a mutual tariff cap, which threatens a full-blown trade war. Next, Israel passed a highly controversial law allowing the death penalty for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. And finally, a staggering quick fact. The UAE holds an estimated 113 billion barrels in oil reserves, mostly sitting right under Abu Dhabi.
Continuing our rapid sweep here. In sports, India's men's team is in the Thomas Cup semis. For disaster management, definitely note the tragic Bargi Dam incident on the Narmada River, where 9 people died. Over in infrastructure, the Mumbai-Pune missing link now features Asia's broadest tunnel. Under social justice, the Delhi Directorate of Education ordered schools to only collect fees monthly, totally banning advance fees for admission. And finally, for health policy, Ayushman Bharat coverage has expanded threefold since 2018. It's lowered the median out-of-pocket expenditure per hospitalization, down to exactly 11,285 rupees. That is a brilliant, highly specific statistic to drop into your mains essays.
All right, after covering all this ground, I want to leave you with a definitive directive derived straight from today's study material. It's a really fundamental reminder of exactly how you need to approach this journey every single day.
And the crucial point is this: don't just memorize the facts, question the underlying structures. Think about it. If our GST collections are breaking records while our domestic consumption stalls,
What kind of economy are we really building? Think about that one. I'll see you in our next explainer.
If you're ready to really practice all 8 mains questions from today's news, and you want to get your hands on prelims MCQs and detailed notes, go ahead and download the complete PDF. Just scan the QR code on your screen or use the link in the description to join our Telegram channel. Keep up the amazing work, stay consistent, and I will see you in the next explainer.